Hey, community group facilitators. This is a replacement facilitator training for those of you who weren't able to make it on Sunday morning. So, thanks for tuning in and taking a minute to watch this, and we'll try to make it as short and sweet as possible. So, we'll start here. This is maybe a logo you've seen before, but I bring it up just to show you that our purpose and vision for community groups is simply this: we want to provide a place for people at Mitchell Road to belong, grow, and serve. So that's what we're aiming for. So when you think about your job as a facilitator, this is what you're striving for. You're trying to provide a place and create an environment where people can belong, grow, and serve. So think about everything that we're going to talk about through that lens. How, as a facilitator, can I better foster that kind of environment? And I want you to think even now, where do you think your group is lacking, and where do you think you're doing pretty well on belonging, growing, and serving, and maybe that set some goals for this year in that regard. So, a facilitator, the definition is simply this: it's a person that makes an action or a process easy or easier. So, when you think about your role as a facilitator, what you're simply trying to do is make that process, that action of providing a place for people to belong, grow, and serve easier. You're trying not to get in the way. You're trying to create a clear pathway for that to happen, to facilitate that process, to facilitate that action. And so your goal is this: to guide your group toward the application of truth so that the gospel further grips their hearts and their lives are changed as a result. To guide your group toward the application of truth so that the gospel further grips their hearts and that their lives are changed as a result. So that's what you're shooting for. You know, you hear the most common criticism of community groups is, I've already heard the sermon. Why do I need to do a community group and talk about it again? And the answer is simple. We need to be reminded. We need a place to talk in community. That's why God's given us community to learn and apply the truths that we know already, but figure out how to implement them in our lives. And that's your goal as a facilitator in this conversation. So I want to start here with just some qualities of a good facilitator. The first one is simply that you're obedient to the call. You're watching this, you're a facilitator because God's called you to do it. He's placed that call in your life and you've been obedient to it. You may feel like, oh man, the people in my group are way smarter, way wiser, way more educated, way more Bible savvy than I am. But that's not necessarily what qualifies a good facilitator. The first thing is simply that they're obedient to God's call on their life, and He will equip you to do this work. Secondly, the quality of a good facilitator is that they're transparent and vulnerable. Um, in community groups, it can be difficult to know sometimes at what level do I share? What part of my life should I or should I not reveal to these people? And so your role as a facilitator is to lead the way in transparency and vulnerability in a very real way. Your group will only go as far as you'll take them. So maybe that means that you have to be the first to share something difficult in your life, to ask for prayer for something you're struggling with, to bring up something from your past that would benefit your group. And so you have to lead the way in transparency and vulnerability, and maybe be the first one to share your story. Now, obviously, it's mixed company in community groups. There's things that we don't want to share that wouldn't be appropriate. But I think in general, we want to see community groups move to a deeper level where deeper things are being shared. So follow-up questions like, where have you seen that in your life when somebody shares something? Or what do you think that looks like at work tomorrow? Or how have you done that in your family? Things that help us to apply the gospel in a deeper way and to be transparent and vulnerable with each other. The third thing is that good facilitators are tension managers. Here's what I mean by that. Throughout the year in community groups, there are going to be delicate situations, tense situations that come up. Maybe two group members disagreeing with one another. Maybe somebody sharing something that the rest of the group doesn't know what to do with. And your role as a facilitator is to know, when do I press into that? When do I bring the group out of that situation? When do I follow up later? When is it appropriate for us to talk about this as a group? And that can be difficult, but you're probably lean one of two ways. You think all tension is good or all tension is bad. And there are errors on both sides there. But your role as a facilitator is to figure out, when is this tension healthy? When is it helpful? to the group. And so tension management can be really difficult, but you know this if you've facilitated for any period of time, there will be these situations. And so a good facilitator is a good tension manager and knows how to handle those moments with grace and sensitivity. Fourthly, good facilitators are good listeners. David Augsburger, you can see the quote there, says, "Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they're almost indistinguishable." And so I'd simply say this. As a facilitator, you know that you're the one asking the question, so more than likely the answerer is looking at you. You'd love for them to look at the whole group, but most of the eye contact is going to be made with you. And so it's really important that people know they're being heard by the way you listen to them, which means good eye contact, which means your body language, which means the way you verbally affirm them and non-verbally affirm them. And it's entirely possible that if someone feels like they're not being heard, they're just going to shut down. And so I know one of my struggles as a facilitator is that I'm looking at my phone, figuring out which question I'm going to ask next after I just asked a question, which I think is detrimental to the people that are answering the question I just asked. So we have to be good listeners as facilitators. Next, a couple of challenges of a facilitator. The number one challenge by far is that as facilitators, we have this tendency to talk too much. You have to understand that as a facilitator, this is a different role than being a Sunday school teacher or a Bible study leader or anything like that. In a very real way, we're trying to get out of the way and facilitate this process of belonging, growing, and serving. Remember that. And so fight the tendency to talk too much, which happens when there's silence, which happens when you feel like you throw out a question and your group is just staring at you and you just want to fill the space with your talking. But just remember, your goal as a facilitator is not to dispense information, it's to facilitate discussion. And so this is a big challenge, and I would just encourage you, maybe ask somebody in your group, maybe it's your spouse or a good friend in there, hey, do you think I talk too much as a facilitator? And maybe just see what they say. Number two, staying focused. A big job of facilitators to help the group stay on track. There are lots of good things that can come up in discussion, but maybe aren't entirely helpful for what you're trying to accomplish. So you have to help the group not get sidetracked by even good things and things that can hijack group discussions. And so focus on the goal, which is application of the sermon, helping people to belong, grow, and serve. Thirdly, a challenge of a facilitator is a group that doesn't talk. I want you to think even now of reasons this might happen in your group, but we've all experienced this before. Maybe it's a consistent struggle, maybe it's just a periodic struggle, it's just a weeknight, but a group that doesn't talk. And I would just encourage you to do this. Don't be afraid to gently draw people out, to ask people what they think about things if maybe they aren't sharing that night. Of course, you don't want to make people feel unsafe if they're just shy or something like that, but your goal is to draw everyone into the conversation, to figure out a way to get your group to talk. And I think it's really important to affirm people when they do speak, maybe if they don't speak often, to affirm them and show them that their input is valuable. Fourth struggle is a dominant group member. There are lots of things we could say about this, but you might have somebody in your group that dominates conversation. They're always sharing their opinion, which is sometimes good, sometimes not good. They're always, in some ways, sidetracking the conversation. There are lots of ways to deal with that. I'll just give you one practical way that you're going to think won't work, but I promise you it will if you'll try it. If you sit right beside that dominant person, it helps them not talk as much, because what happens is you end up making eye contact with them if they're across the circle, and that eye contact to them is an opportunity to talk, and so they're going to take it. When they're right beside you, they get less eye contact, they feel less time to jump in, and of course we value their opinion, we want to hear it, but dominant members can kill a group's environment. And you might also want to have a conversation with that person even during group and say, hey, help me get other people involved and let's hear what they say. Last challenge of a facilitator is being too attached to the plan. So you get questions and you have somewhere you want the group to go that night, but your group is just stuck on that first question and they just keep talking about it, let me encourage you and say that's a great thing. If conversation is happening, if it's going in a good direction, don't worry about getting through all the questions. Don't worry about it if you had a question you hoped your group would get to but they didn't. If they're talking and sharing and belonging and growing, that's a good thing. And so don't be too attached to a plan that you might have. Let me just say, here are a couple keys to a successful community group night. They're very simple, just three: fellowship, sermon discussion and application, and prayer. I think probably we're doing really well in fellowship and sermon discussion and application, but we do forget prayer often. And let me just encourage you, even if it means cutting off a conversation early, to save 10 minutes, to save 15 minutes for prayer. Ask for a request. It might be somebody's only opportunity to say something that's going on in their lives, and for the group to pray for them. It's the most forgotten aspect, but it's absolutely a crucial one. So those are the three things you want to make sure that you hit on a community group night. A couple logistical things. You'll receive questions on the Thursday before the Sunday night community group. Spend some time looking at those, tailoring them to your group's needs. If you get those questions late, that's okay. It may happen throughout the year. So when you do have time, make a plan about where the conversation will go, but remember, don't be attached to it. Secondly, on the first night, hosts have the majority of the discussion time to nail down group logistics, and after that, I'll have an icebreaker question for you to work through as a group, just to introduce yourselves to one another. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. If you have any questions or concerns or ever want to talk, feel free to call me, email me, and we can figure it out together. We're thankful for you, and we can't wait for a good group or a good year of community group with you facilitating your groups towards belonging, growing, and serving through community groups at Mitchell Road.